Welcome to Upshift, no direction network podcast that gives you an edge on Essence 20. I'm Ryan Costello, one of the designers of the Essence 20 system and an author on the G.I. Joe Transformers My Little Pony role-playing game core rulebooks, as well as over a dozen other projects for Essence 20 from Renegade Game Studios.
And I'm Charles Cushman, and we're here to tell you the rest of the story.
Oh. Yes, there is an option that is in every single Essence 20 core rulebook, or equivalent. It's called story points, or equivalent, and the first three core rulebooks even call it the Great Equalizer, which is like the most just blown up any language comes. Like, you know, here's your skills, here's your options, here's whatever, but here's the thing that will save your game. So that is high praise for a resource that a lot of players and even GMs forget exists. We're going to get into it. We're going to talk about how it actually can be used to improve your game, and why you shouldn't forget it the next time you roll up an Essence 20 campaign.
And there's one of the things that's really awesome about actually getting, the co-hosting of this is we're exploring so much of the game that I otherwise might ignore. Like, it's super easy to get lost in the essences and perks and all the different pieces, but there are some fundamental chunks of it that can make a real difference. And if you're a GM, knowing how to use them is going to be extremely valuable as well. So very interested in this one.
You played an officer, which is a role that has a story point generating perk. Like a low-level one, too. It's one of the go-to officer perks.
I believe it's like a 15 difficulty to be able to generate a story point. And so story point farming, well, it only is supposed to happen in combat. With a good inspirational speech, our GM has kind of been allowing it. And there's a lot of stuff, which I'm sure we're going to go into, that allow you to use story points. So having a couple more was always a good thing to do when there wasn't anything else that I could do.
Yeah, it is called Rouse. And yeah, you get it at first level. It is one of the cornerstone abilities of the officer. So first we'll talk about a little bit of history, because story points, or the concept of a narrative control consumable, is not new to Essence 20. I don't know exactly when it started. I did a little research into the history of story points, and I couldn't really find it, but I do know that for at least 20 years, like before I launched my first podcast, there was a podcast called Narrative Control, and it was named after this kind of mechanic where, yes, there are dice that determine outcomes, but there are consumables within certain games that override the dice if you are willing to spend them. So the idea is it is a give and take. You make your character and you invest in certain skills, and that is ultimately what is supposed to define how your character interacts with the world. But every now and then you as a player can say, no, that is not the outcome that my character deserves or that this situation calls for. And so I am going to spend a story point to shift reality just enough so that what happened isn't exactly what happened. I know there are some games that story points is the entirety of the system. With us, story points are a nudge. They will give you a couple of advantages or options, or allow you to retake something that didn't go the way you thought it should. But ultimately, it is not a completely overriding power. It is something that plays out in the background. But there's a couple of more generous and broad options within the story point rules that can be really fun to play around with. Because ultimately, they're story points. They could have been called hero points, and actually we'll go into that in a second. They could have been called a lot of things, but the fact that they're story points kind of emphasizes that this is supposed to be to correct the direction that the story goes, and that everyone, because it's a pool, everyone agrees that these are the things that tell the story of these characters the best.
And I to throw it out there, like I'm a big fan of the dice being part of the narration, right? The GM is there and they're telling part of the story. They're setting up the story. Players are there telling their reaction to the story, but the dice are the ones that say how this goes. And sometimes the dice are filthy liars that don't want it to be an exciting or interesting campaign. And so having any tool that you need in order to make sure that, a rolling a 2 and all 2s across the board isn't going to completely scuttle the campaign on just one piece of bad luck It's a hugely important thing if you are trying to create a really coherent and interesting narrative. And it's not like apparently some people play this game not on podcasts. But everybody wants a good narrative. It's what makes you feel good. It's what makes a campaign memorable. And so having tools that allow you to do that, and probably a whole bunch of other things else, to override those dice is, I think, super important to getting that feeling that you're looking for.
There's also the narrative that happens at the table. The should I spend a story point? Can I spend a story point? And then it's like everyone weighs the drama of the moment and decides whether this is in fact a good time to do it. And you said like you don't want one bad roll to affect it. But sometimes you're just rolling cold all night and it's the whole group is raising you up because they're like, use the story points. The dice don't like you tonight, but re-roll them, get your bonuses, whatever you have to get over this cold streak. And again, it is the whole group that is making this decision for the benefit of the person that might otherwise not have any fun that night.
Mm-hmm. And it's really very much, in my experience with it, everything about Essence 20 and the groups in Essence 20 is very cooperative. Everything is, I give you an upshift. I'll give you, I'll help you get over your snag. I'll help you so it is very much team play. And so having a team resource that also encourages people to think about our resources as a pool of resources is a good tool for for creating that group dynamic. So I agree absolutely with that.
Now, a little disambiguation. So actually, this might be more just development trivia, but when the first 3 games were being developed, so Power Rangers, G.I. Joe, Transformers, every game had its own resource separate from story points. So Power Rangers had power points, and they use these to activate specific powers. Transformers has Energon points, and they use them in the same way that Energon is used in narratives. So, to give you a boost of health, to create a tool, just things we've seen them use. It is something that's more, in both cases, it's something that's more in the hands of the characters rather than just the players. And the characters are making the choice to sacrifice things. They don't reset narratives. They just unlock certain powers. G.I. Joe, we decided the equivalent would be hero points. And one of the reasons that every role has the Be a Hero section was that this was the role that required the expenditure of hero points. But ultimately in the development, unlike PowerPoints and Energon, hero points were another narrative control consumable that was controlled by the player more than the character. And the line between hero points and story points was vague. Plus, G.I. Joe didn't need that supernatural ability as much as, or it didn't need it at all, especially when compared to Power Rangers and Transformers. And so that was just it was all then compacted into story points. And G.I. Joe just happens to have more perks tied into roles that cost story points to use.
I throw it out there. We were talking last week about Moxie points. Is that sort of a return to this design space, or is it something entirely different?
Moxie point is very specific to the old hand because the old hand is supposed to be above and beyond the average soldier or even the average G.I. Joe. And so it's the fact that they've been there. They're the ones that know when to grit their teeth and bear it. And Moxie points are very specific to that feel. So no, I wouldn't say that I was thinking back on hero points when I decided Moxie points. That was just sometimes a role requires a special pool of its own points, and Old Hand felt like a good one to have that mechanic.
Plus, Moxie's a really great word.
Moxie is a great word. Now, the other thing is that in My Little Pony, they're called friendship points, and they almost exactly work like story points. And it was a similar situation in that we were writing about friendship points to activate certain friendship-based magical abilities, and there wasn't a big enough difference between why we had friendship points and why we had story points. So they were put into one pool, and for thematic reasons, they were just called friendship points. There are a couple of points where they work a little differently, and we'll go over them, but that's like every single book, or most of the books, have a slightly different explanation of how and when you can use story points, and My Little Pony just has a little bit more as far as what separates it from the others, plus a different name. But really, it's all story points.
Well, we talked a little bit about how my character generated them. What are some of the ways that you can generate and gain story points?
All right, so we're going to go through how each different core rulebook or equivalent. I keep saying or equivalent because Welcome to Night Vale doesn't have a core rulebook. It has the Citizen's Guide, but basically it's the core rulebook for that system, or that setting rather. So G.I. Joe, Power Rangers, and Transformers have almost cut and paste the exact same thing, with a couple of differences that we can go into. So PCs start a session with one story point per character. They're pulled together, and it's a per session. Normally, I like tying things to things that tie into the character, so I like per day, per scene, whatever. But because story points are, again, a meta consumable, a meta resource, it makes more sense that it's every time you sit down for the session, you're restarting this pool, you're refiguring out what's going on with your characters, and you're telling a new story, and therefore you get a new pool of story points. Every time you roll a skill test, every time a skill test fumbles, and I think this was a Brian edition. Actually, I think for the most part, Brian wrote how the skill point rules work. I really liked this. This makes fumbles a double-edged sword in that you fumble, but that gives you a story point, and it gives you a narrative thing of like, oh, my character is learning from this big screw-up, and that will help them in the future. Or you can spend a story point to re-roll it, which we'll get into in a second, but that's actually costing you effectively 2 story points, the one you're not gaining and the one you're spending. And so I've seen some really dramatic, like a lot of dramatic tension around whether or not a fumble should be re-rolled, or whether we can take the fumble right now and we'll use the story point later. All 3 of them say particularly action-packed or exciting scenes. I think what this is ultimately trying to say is if you are particularly engaged, especially as a group, then I think that you can award story points for that. Ingenious ideas that result in moving the plot forward. Yes, like I have definitely seen sometimes when a player will be like, what if, and then just starts connecting dots, and it's like, you have been paying attention, that is exactly what's going on, here's your story point, and let's keep going. This one I am less excited by, because there's no drama to it. The moving the plot forward is its own reward, and so throwing a story point on top of that, yeah, it's a nice bonus, but it kind of gets lost in the fact that you've already figured something else out. Particularly good role-playing scenes or playing up a PC's flaws. So this in My Little Pony is specifically called out as playing up the hang-ups, and then actually Night Vale does both. It says playing up your hang-ups or flaws. So the difference is that flaws are non-mechanical. It's just like part of your backstory or whatever. However you define your character, role-playing the flaws, like in a situation that will not help your character, but you're pointing out the errors built into your character. I like that a lot. That's a very good reason to reward someone with a story point, especially because when it comes to hang-ups where there's a mechanical deficit for choosing this, oftentimes that's then on the players to remember what their hang-ups are. So if they do call up a hang-up that a GM might have totally forgotten about at an inopportune time for the player character, but an opportune time to like tell the story of this character, that is a great reason to reward a story point.
I remember Eric awarding one when we were on Cybertron, just the absolute like misery that we were having just been. Wait, can we say that? Yeah, it's out now. Having just been tortured and having, being in this incredibly alien thing and kind of falling apart. So he recognized that as not necessarily great for us, but certainly good for the story. And I don't know if we ever had to burn any story points on that particular one, but it was very nice to, it recognizes that, that when you're in deep with a character, that those flaws and things are part of it. And the suffering of a character is sometimes good storytelling.
But I will put a pin in what you're saying that you don't know if we spent the story points, because when we get to spending the story points, I'll talk about when I think our group tends to use them. But I recently ran a session for a friend, and just his group of players were curious about the game, and they were using story points in ways that I never considered and really elevated the gameplay experience. So that'll be coming up. There's a couple more ways to gain story points as outlined in My Little Pony. So I'll start by saying that I was so impressed by these sections that I went back into the original documents to see who wrote them, and it was me. This happens far too often. It is one of those things where it's like, oh, I've forgotten more things than you'll ever contribute. But when I say that, I say it concerned that I did not remember writing this.
This is not bragging. This is
Yeah.
actual fear
What is
and
wrong with my
worry for the
brain?
future. Yeah, that's
So in My Little Pony, in addition to the bullet points, it says player behavior that the GM wants to see more of. So a joke that gets a laugh, a decision during a difficult conflict that helps the other characters at the expense of that player's character, and a riveting speech during a session's climax. That also says behavior outside of the game as long as everyone agrees they are handled fairly. Working community service, scheduling the game, giving another player a ride to the session, anything that would make Princess Celestia proud, short of trapping your sister on the moon.
I'm missing the context, but I'm still laughing.
Well, because Princess Celestia trapped her sister on the moon when they were having a particularly like magical and epic disagreement.
I feel that just feels extreme, but I don't know their situation, so I can't judge.
They got over it.
Good.
So these take the meta to like to another level, and then to way a whole other level, and that it's outside the game is affecting it. So I am curious, how do you feel about these kinds of behaviors rewarding story points?
There has to be a tool to be able to encourage the behavior the GM wants to see. There has to be some kind of reward that you can give. This isn't really about XP. It's like in some other games, though, there isn't special awards you can do. There's not much you can do with gear because there's, we have a whole system to be able to manage that. So there has to be some little additional thing that a GM can do to acknowledge things and also to have some sort of mechanical reward for them. At least to me as a GM, I like having those tools. So I don't know if I would award one for working community service. But I mean, sure, why not? If that's what gets people out and working community service, I guess. But when it comes down to it, the behavior within the game needs to be rewarded. And you need to call it out, and you need to have some sort of mechanical advantage associated with it in order to be able to say this is really a part of the game, right? It is not. This is a game, and it is a game about cooperation. There is very, very, very low likelihood that there's any of these are a solo mission. These are all G.I. Joe as a team, or My Little Pony group as a group of ponies or whatever the group
A
is.
friendship circle.
Of friendships. I knew there was a word. There had to be one. Ponies have words for everything, but you need to understand what that means, and you need to be able to reward it. And so these kind of make sense, but you do have to. Using them way too liberally can end up with a well, they don't mean anything anymore. And so there has to be at least some control over that in order to be able to make sure that they are still valuable as a reward, if that makes sense. On the other hand, there's a lot of ways in game to generate them. So
I'm going to highlight a couple of them. So first of all, a joke that gets a laugh. This could actually be about breaking character and more about the experience at the table. And that's something that I generally don't want. I think that a really engaged group leads to a very specific type of fun that you can only get in a rich role-playing game. And while I enjoy a good joke around the table, it's not something I am likely to personally give a story point for. But, I wasn't writing just my version of the rules. I acknowledge that if everyone's just there to have a good time, someone that gets a laugh at the table is a good way to have a good time. On the opposite end of it, a riveting speech during a session's climax. Spoken more broadly, this is like rewarding role-playing. And I remember when we were playing Shadowrun with my group, there is rules within it to give extra XP for good role-playing. And after a couple of sessions of me getting that extra XP, the GM started not giving me so much, even though I was still engaging and just as good role-playing, because I was getting too much XP and pulling ahead of everyone else. And it was like, this is now becoming a balance issue. And it's also like, it's a judgment call. It becomes a GM saying like, you are good at this or even potentially better than this at other people at the table. When you make it a story point, because it's session specific and because it gets added to the pool and the whole group benefits from it, it's not so much one person pulling ahead for being the constant role player or just being a player that prefers to role play in character in there, like to really get into character. So it's just better than an XP bonus for good role playing, I think.
And more balanced. I mean, what it comes down to is the whole group is benefiting from it, which means that it doesn't necessarily feel like favoritism. I love dramatic speeches at points. I love that, but I'm forever GM, so really, I'm used to it. It wouldn't be a high point of the like. It wouldn't be the climax if there wasn't somebody giving a speech, and if nobody else is that, okay, I'm going to be the one giving the speech as a player. So I do that, but I always try and roll beforehand to see whether or not I'm going to be successful at that, and if the GM likes it or forces it to go in a different direction or it makes a difference, then I know Eric will recognize those things. And I certainly would too. You're right in that XP can be a trap. It can it can unbalance the party and it can look like favoritism, but I don't see story points as being that way. So it's a good reward.
Now, Night Vale adds
like nachos at them, like give them food or
give them food and throw nachos at them are two different things.
Well, I mean, if they can catch them in their mouth, then it's technically the same.
Of all the things, like nachos, I picture it dipped. Like, is it dripping with hot cheese?
I was thinking Doritos, but
okay,
it's a cultural difference between Ontario and Quebec, I guess.
Of course. Night Vale introduces a couple of new ways that you can gain story points. One of them is the host calls for initiative before conflict with a dangerous threat. And I like this. This is kind of like when you're playing a video game and you come to like a heal point and a save point, and you're like, oh no, something big is coming, because they would not just be giving me all this stuff right before it. So again, there is inherent drama to the fact that you are getting these story points. And especially like if it's like a pregnant pause between giving the story points and calling for initiative, it gives your players a chance to really like ruminate on why. Where did these story points come from, GM?
I do like that. I would not have thought of that as being a tool for them, but to create suspense or create the impending doom, I guess, would be more appropriate for Night Vale. I see that as an interesting tool.
And then this is similar to what My Little Pony talks about. It says completing a moving or funny role-playing scene, or a player leans into their citizens' hang-ups or flaws. I do like the idea of completing a scene, because oftentimes as a GM, I'll just kind of indulge a role-playing scene that doesn't quite move the plot forward, but you got a wacky character, people are bouncing off of it, it's ultimately enhancing the play experience, and you do see this kind of thing in the fiction that we are trying to recreate through this role-playing experience. So having something to say like, thanks for indulging me, here's your story point, now let's move on with the plot, I like that a lot.
Yeah, your bazooka and alpine kind of discussions where, they're not necessary, but they are fun.
So now we've got all these story points. Charles, what are we going to do with them?
Oh, well, we're going to reroll our ones, all of our ones.
All right.
On the skill dice, not on the 20, right?
No, it says reroll any dice result or any die result of a 1. So I am going to put a little asterisk here and say, I don't like this one. I think it should just be reroll. And the reason is I don't like that 1 becomes a better result than 2. Because a lot of the times if you get a 2, you're failing just as much, but you are denied the option to then re-roll it. Whereas if it really is just like, oh, shoot, I failed at a time I don't want to fail, which seems to be the intent of this re-roll option, then I think that it should just be you can choose to re-roll. I'm also going to add the caveat that a lot of the times when role-playing games have a mechanic that lets you re-roll dice, they say before results are revealed, and I hate that, especially as a GM. Because the back and forth between players and GMs is, oh, you rolled, you give me the result, I give you I give you the effect of your result. I don't want to sit there after every single roll and be like, do you want to re-roll that? Or just wait for the times when I know that they failed, which gives away that they failed, and so I might as well just say, I give you the result, I give you the result, you decide whether you're going to re-roll it. Because one way or another, you are changing reality. I think one of the reasons that the games say do not do it if you found out that you failed, you're still re-rolling the dice, which is still on a cosmic level changing your destiny. So why not just find out if it was actually worth it to change the destiny? Because nobody wants to re-roll and find out that they were fine.
Yeah, it's not satisfying. And I do like the idea of this Schrodinger's moment, this quantum state of the story enters after a die roll, but also when you have tools in order to be able to do it, everything just sort of time freezes and we look at the two different directions it could have gone. And but I mean, it needs to be useful. It needs to be satisfying. It needs to change the result in some way, or at least have the opportunity to change the result in some way. So, yeah, I can get why you would find it unsatisfying to, or I get why anyone would find it unsatisfying to not reveal that thing, both mechanically and also it's supposed to make you feel good. You had a bad piece of luck and all of a sudden it turned good.
And I was going to say that look, the thing I put a pin in earlier, this, I think, is the majority of the time that we use our story points, which is why it's so unmemorable, because it really is just, I want to re-roll, and then we get the new result and we move on, and nothing earth-shattering has happened. It would be more memorable had we failed, and then we would have had to deal with the consequences of it, and this just kind of neutralizes a failure most of the time, which is why it's not so memorable. We'll talk about more memorable ways to use story points as we go on. This next one, I think, is super underrated. Roll a skill test as if specialized. So specialization really flattens the curve of the probability curve of whether you're going to succeed or not. And it just feels like there's a lot of story reasons that you could temporarily feel specialized. Like maybe you were studying something. Maybe it's something that has come up before and you're tapping into your experience. Like there's a lot of ways that if the GM is just like, justify how suddenly you are specialized in this specific area. And like if you think a character's wounded and you've got to save them, but you don't have a medicine specialization, so you're just rolling straight science, which could be a D6. Like let's say you've got a decent science. If it's like, oh no, like I like start pumping down and like it's coming back to me all the times that I've seen a wounded soldier and I've had to be the one there, and like every memory that you did not realize that you've like really committed to mind is coming back to you and is controlling the hands. Like that's the kind of moments that this roll a skill test is specialized. And like likewise, if it's an attack that really has to hit, then like, everything slows down. You're really shooting or looking down the scope of your rifle and you are seeing the little bits of debris that could slightly alter the trajectory of your bullet, and you're just waiting for the right moment and pow. So yeah, it may just seem like, I roll more dice and I have a better chance of winning. But again, these are story points. And if you could enhance the story by talking about why at this moment your body becomes better at something that it is otherwise good but not great at, tell that story.
Every story point should have a story.
There you go.
I like it.
Next up is...
Yes, sorry, as you were describing that, sorry, I just see the goes for the shot and imagines in his head if he were to pull the trigger, what would happen, and sees the bullet miss. And that's just in his head. And then what he does is adjusts based on how he saw it about to go if he had done the thing and made the mistake, and instead does it well. And so yeah, again, trying to explain what that quantum state is. I thought about how it would go. It wouldn't go well if I did it that way. My story is that I am going to do it differently as a result of seeing this potentially failing. So I like it. Yep. And every story point should have a story.
So the next one is the most inconsistently written across the different rule books. It is add +5 to a defense. Most of them say before the dice are rolled. Most of them seem to apply to a single die roll. My Little Pony, and I did not write this, I'm definitely going to say that, says add 5 to a defense for the rest of the scene, which is obscene. 5 in Essence 20. Essence 20 is pretty tight and tends to favor defenses. So adding 5 to that just breaks a combat. So I tell every My Little Pony GM to say, like, no, if you're spending a story point, it's for a single roll. G.I. Joe added a caveat, and I imagine this was a Ben edition, because I don't remember doing this. So it's either +5 before the die is rolled, which again is hard to do because the GM and the player are going back and forth, or +1 to a defense after dice are rolled. So if somebody just narrowly hits you, you can spend a story point to like, oh no, looks like I had the extra thick piece of the one true cross on me that day, and it deflects the bullet at the last second.
I like the idea of so the adding +5 to the defense, like that is the you're about to die, right? And you are you're at 1 hit point. You are about your life is about to be taken from you, and you, as a result of that, do something to be able to scramble and hide or something or move away. That does kind of make sense. But on the other hand, like if you got a decent enough pool of story points, you have a vanguard out there, and oh well, it looks like my defense for this round is 29. All of a sudden, there is just it's not combat anymore, right? It's merely this is just going to happen this way. So I like it and don't like it.
Next up, gain temporary access to a minor piece of equipment or tool useful in the scene. So this was the one that the group that I was with was using the most often, and they were doing it to gain kits so that like when they were doing medicine checks, they were able to have the medicine kit so they do not suffer a snag. And things like that. They were just like a lot of like, oh, can I make sure that I have this scope or whatever? It was like just in the context of the mission they were on, they probably would have thought to get this equipment beforehand, and in the moment, it was logical for them to have it, and so they spent the story point. They told how they actually did have that, and they used the equipment in the moment. This is one of the areas that is very vague in how it's applied, so a minor piece of equipment. I'm not going to give you a stick of dynamite that you should not have, but I might give you something with, fleshed out rules and whatnot that you may have come across at some point or didn't check a body and logically you could have. And, that Cobra Eel that you beat would have the air tank. So now if an air tank in this scene will help you, fine, you've got that air tank. There's a lot of room for creativity, and you don't want to say, oh, you didn't pick the right equipment and so you're boned for the rest of the adventure. But you also don't want to pretend like they have unlimited access to all equipment. So spend a story point, get the equipment you need, everything makes sense. Everyone is happy. Get a clue when stumped. This one speaks for itself, and it is deliberately ambiguous. If the players just do not know what to do next, the GM can even offer like, well, if you spend a story point, I can remind you of something that you seem to be forgetting, and like that'll even trigger them to discuss, oh, what could we be forgetting? And then they're talking about the context of the adventure and may not even need to spend that story point. But otherwise, nothing is worse than just a dead end because nobody is making the connection that the adventure writer or the GM thinks is an obvious connection.
Fair enough. I mean, there are many times where, as a GM, you kind of assume that the players are going to, I don't know, remember 2 sessions ago.
Yeah,
and that is a terrible idea. Particularly if you're like 2 or 3 weeks between sessions, there is no expectation that unless they have a Google Doc that they're ready to pull up to do that they're going to remember things like that. So it's a prompt, right? It is a bit of help to be able to overcome some of those the players are not in that frame of mind. And as a GM, I also messed up some things where it's like, well, if you go to a story point, you'll be able to get this clarification that I probably should have provided anyway. And this kind of covers over the oopsie. So anyway, it's I'm hoping that it wouldn't be something I would have to use a lot, either as a player or as a GM. But it's better than sitting there stuck for 20 minutes and nobody having any fun during that time.
On the subject of having a Google Doc, I have been the designated note taker, like self-designated, but still the note taker of a campaign. And I don't know how anyone else does it because I am either using shorthand and quickly writing it, which ends up just confusing chicken scratch, or I am missing the next detail that I should be writing down while writing down the previous one. And when it comes time to check my notes during a session, the session comes to a full stop as I flip through pages that are not annotated, and I do not know exactly where. I have this vague idea that this was 6 pages ago, and like it's an absolute mess. And just being able to say like, I remember something about this, can you remind me? whether you're spending a story point or not, I think the GM should just help them make the connections that logically their character should know. Don't just take narrative control away from don't take agency away from the player and tell them what they remember. But if clearly the player has made the connection that the character needs to make in the moment, yeah, go with it. If you tell them, it is still cooperative storytelling and it's still something that you all came to together.
I've been, I guess, blessed or cursed with players. There's always one in every group, which is an excellent note taker, and typically a much better note taker than I am as a GM. I will have excellent preparatory notes for the going into the session, and then sketchy crap about what happened during it. And then I have to kind of reconstruct that within the story. And sometimes I will just go over and read the notes that the note taker took because they're really good at it. It's a skill set. And it's one that one happens to be a teacher, the other one happens to be a banker. So they're jobs where they need to be able to take good notes and be able to get right information down. So yeah, I mean, it's good. Maybe when you're selecting your players, just pick one that can, do that sort of thing, and that will always help everything out.
Next, some perks, game effects, or special rules may require the expenditure of a story point. That's usually pretty clear. This is something exclusive to Power Rangers. Power Rangers can spend 1 story point per team member to cause a grid power bloom, generating 1d2 personal power for each team member. I am just going to say, Power Rangers is peppered with a lot of these 1d2s, and it's, I don't know, just set it to a number. It's weird that it's this minor random element is added to it. But anyway, other than that, that's something Power Rangers specific, and you can definitely picture scenes in Power Rangers where everyone's just like, we could do this together, go gang, and they all say something together, or speaking a circle, even though they're basically saying one sentence together, and then they all manage to get the power that they need to overcome the enemy that they're facing.
Is there like a coin mechanic in Power Rangers that would make it desirable for you to be doing coin flips, or?
The official dice do have D2s, and but I was going to say maybe they're underused, but no. If you only put one rank into a skill point, into a skill, you have the D2. Like, characters have their D2s. I don't know. I think it's just a little bit of randomization where randomization isn't necessary. Now, the thing that most people forget is that GMs can also use story points. And again, as long as they're tied into the narrative, there is a lot that a GM can do with them. First, let's just talk about the ways that GMs can gain them. At the beginning of each major scene, add, again, a little randomization, 1d2 plus 1 story point to the pool. I think this should just be 1 per player at the table. Plus 1, sure, if you want. I do not understand where this equation came from. If an NPC critically succeeds at a skill test, you know what? At first I thought that said if a PC critically succeeds, and I was like, oh, the GM deserves so many more skill points. We need to tell Eric. But no, if it's an NPC, okay, so if a character controlled by the GM critically succeeds, then they gain a story point. Okay, that makes sense. And I love this one. If a PC makes an ethical decision, they might regret later.
No! Oh, there are so many of those.
What? What are you talking about?
So many of those. I think that's actually sort of the design of my character is around ethical decisions that you regret later. Certainly. I feel that actually may not be as essential to elder GMs, because they'll get you back for that,
Right.
that interesting, that decision that you made. That'll probably pay off in the longer term rather than the shorter one within a session. So I don't know if I would actually use that.
Yeah, so that is the debate of whether GMs should even gain story points. And in fact, the My Little Pony role-playing game, during editing, it was changed so that GMs don't get story points. But I'm going to make some arguments for ways that GMs can that will be satisfying for all involved. But they might regret later. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be used in, like, they might regret later. You can just write a story about that. It doesn't need to be a give and take of the story point is now how you are. Like, karma is coming to get you in the middle of this combat. Especially because story points can't force someone else to reroll. Like not even, there's no GM specific ways that you can spend story points. So if the GM were to make a player re-roll because they spent a story point, that's them just house ruling how story points work. So this ethical decision thing, there's no way of imposing karma on them other than that the universe keeps, giving this Cobra Trooper more and more chances to hit you with his blaster. But there's a couple of things that GMs can do within the rules that can improve the story. And one of them, you mentioned that, the Vanguard is going out there with his insanely high defenses. One of the things about the Vanguard defenses is that they are susceptible to electromagnetic weapons. And when I design threats, I do not design them keeping in mind that there might be Vanguards and therefore I should give everyone electromagnetic weapons. I am designing to the theme of the character and what we have seen them do in the lore, and rarely have I seen characters use electromagnetic equipment. However, if Cobra became aware of this one Joe that kept owning them because they were going around with this defensive shield, then it's likely that they would develop equipment training for their Vipers that would include electromagnetic equipment. And so you're starting to use story points to modify threats to needle at the defense or the weaknesses, the vulnerabilities of the PCs, which again is totally in story. It is that you have a defense that we need to exploit that the generic version of these characters don't, but this campaign specific version of them would have learned to use these things against them. And so if a character has ballistic armor, then suddenly you give everybody a crossbow that they can just bust out and overcome that. If you know that somebody is known for going in like just tanking in literal tank-based armor, then suddenly somebody that might have armor piercing would instead have anti-tank weapons. So again, it's to make it's one less frustrating for everyone involved because nobody likes seeing that Vanguard just owning the entire combat because nobody can hit it. And two, it is just a reflection of the story that is being told and the give and take of how these things would naturally evolve in the story and in the campaign world.
Yeah, so the more with those two examples, I'm not sure. Is there? It would depend on the GM's level of transparency about what the threats are and how they'll be affected. Like I don't think that a GM would need to use a story point to give that additional weapon. It would become part of the story, and the GM is the controller of the story. It feels a little weird that the storyteller would need a mechanism to be able to tell the story over and above their incredible godlike power, as it can be undone by absolute goblinism. But it can, like, they don't need anything more than what they have in order to be able to make sure that the story is interesting. You kind of, in saying that, you kind of turned me around on it. I don't know if there is really a necessity of having them.
Well, it is a good reminder that if things aren't going your way, you do have these resources that you can use. You're making a valid argument in that the GM is supposed to be omnipotent and they don't really need all the exact same gives and takes of the players because it needs to be more balanced on the player side. But if the GMs are looking for an excuse to have that equipment that would be good against the players, now you have a mechanism that allows you to do it.
Yeah, I think I would be as a player terrified if the GM goes, okay, I'm going to use a story point. Oh.
Well, think of the stories you can tell. Where's that +5 defense coming up? You've probably like hoisted up one of your downed Vipers and are using it as a human shield.
Yeah, sounds about right. Plus, in situations, I remember Eric talking about a campaign where somebody with an incredibly amazing sniper build, killed Serpentor from a distance, which happened in the comics, so completely legitimate, but also ended the fight too early. And so mechanisms like that, where you could use that +5 defense to be able to say, okay, I don't want him to die first round. He's got stories to tell. Might be a valuable piece, but I'm not sure that, again, that just seems like it's like giving somebody with a sledgehammer a new hammer. Well, yeah, I mean, but they already have.
Well, all right. So it does give us as designers a safety net because the two roles that have come up are the sniper and the sniper's focus and the Vanguard, and both of those I think are overclocked and I think should both be pulled back. for the reasons that we've been describing. And these story points, again, give the GM the opportunity to just undo those things that it's like, it's not a big win if a sniper kills Serpentor in one shot. It's either an exploitation or just stumbling across a very powerful build. And nobody is satisfied except for the sniper, maybe a little bit proud of himself. So, yeah, the story points, again, give an in-game reason that you can say why this didn't quite work out the way that they thought it had.
All right, I'm cool with that. You can continue then. Oh.
All right. My next bullet point is called Hawk's Personnel Files and the Future of Story Points. So there are two, not pearls, perks. There are two perks, or actually technically a perk and a power, but they are on the threat side and they are using story points against the players. So Scarlet has Intelligence Gathering. When a PC uses a story point, Scarlet rolls a skill test. On a success, Scarlet gains a point in her intelligence points pool. She can spend an intelligence point to gain an edge on a skill test or to activate a power. I will say this was added she begins with 2 intelligence points, but then this line was added in editing, and I do not understand what their intent was. A GM can spend 1 story point to give her 2 intelligence points once per turn. So
GM can?
The GM can spend, well, yeah, because she's a threat.
Oh, right, okay, got it.
But I don't know if this is because they missed that she gains her intelligence points every time she intercepts one, or if this is in addition to the one she gains from intercepting, she can spend a story point in the GM's pool to gain 2 intelligence points once per turn. I would favor the latter because it just means that if you are low on intelligence points, you don't need to have to wait for the PCs to start spending their own story points. You can spend yours. And it also kind of shows on like a transparency between player and GM's thing is that the players may stop using story points so much because they know Scarlet's around, which is a nice narrative reaction to the character that is in the scene. And then if the GM is using story points to fuel this character's abilities, it's kind of showing that the player's tactic is working and that now they have to use a consumable resource.
I like that play space. It's meta. Because it's using an in-game resource to manage a meta resource, but it's also a place where the players they don't know that they're vulnerable. They won't know that they're vulnerable until the first time they face Scarlet.
Well, and then there is something going on between the characters that she is intercepting their intelligence. She is learning from them, and so they have to find ways to work around it. And yeah, there is a level of meta to it, but it also, you can fill in the blanks between what your character is experiencing and what you have to do at the table, which is the essence of role-playing games.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's so what we're going to do is we're going to find this particular thing that we forgot and we had it all along. And then Scarlet comes along and she had removed it from the bag. She snuck up and took it out there. And so you try to get it and you can't. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden she has rifled through your bag and thus knows more about what it is that you're attempting to accomplish. So I do see a significant amount of narrative power there.
So Scarlet's is a passive ability. Baroness is a power that is, she has to spend a move action to use. It's called Extract Information. Baroness can trick or scare a target into divulging valuable intel. She can attempt a skill test. On a success, she gains 1 of the PC's story points, which she can use against them. If the PCs don't have story points, the attempt is wasted. So Scarlet's translate into something that a resource she already uses, whereas Baroness, it's the broadness of story points. It's a much more direct give and take. Both of these I designed for Hawk's Personnel Files, and both of them I was just giddy when I came up with the idea that you can you can attack skill points. So I did say, you can attack story points. I did say Hawk's Personnel Files and the future of story points. This, I think, reflects what the future could be like. I don't know when next I'll design a threat that thematically it makes sense that they can mess with their story points. Both Scarlet and Baroness are intelligence officers, and so it makes sense that like story points feels like a good pool for them to tap into. I don't know. I may come up with other ways that you can use or interact with a character's story points. Do you have any ideas for ways that thematically work for story points and different types of threats?
Well, I'll first say that this is super important because the key to Essence 20 being as good as it can possibly be is exploring every single possible piece of it. broader and wider than most systems, which are based on kits and different things. It has all of these pieces, but it is very easy to gloss over them. It's very easy to kind of, well, I'm not going to read that section because I'm focused on this other one and miss a very, very important part of the story. Story points, there are going to be, I think, a lot of abilities that might be able to use them because as the generation ability becomes more regular, like the way that officers can use them, it means that there are going to be more outlets needed in order to be able to make sure that's a whole bunch of stuff, but I think that there's a sneak attack damage kind of thing that you can do with story points for one of the infiltrator skills. I'm trying to remember if
That they
that
can
I just
use
made it
a
up.
story point to use it? Not that they're
Yeah,
sneak attacking the story points.
no, they need to
Okay.
use that story point. So in a situation where it's used for a mechanical effect, I can imagine somebody with mystic power going, "You don't have that story point. So that thing that you were trying to do, you don't have it, and you never did." So it prevents you from being or blocks you from being able to use that. So if you were planning on using it, all of a sudden you're stopped. It's very similar to what Scarlet is doing, but no benefit other than it's just a whoosh, that's gone. It's counterspell. So there is a function like that is interesting. There's also a function that I would probably explore about getting over a certain threshold of story points in a game allows you to do a certain thing. So
Interesting.
we tend to burn them one at a time. What if you could burn five at once? What kind of
Gain
game effect would
25
that
or
have?
plus 25 to defense.
Well, no, but I mean, just to make a major, it would have to be something epic to pay it off. But instead of spending them one at a time, spend a whole bunch of them at once. And then that makes these counter spells even more dangerous because if you start, saving up all of these story points through heroic and cooperative activity, and you're about to, go super saiyan on them with them, then having that feels like more of a threat. And so it means learning more about your enemy and what they can do. But I do think that when you have something that is just slightly meta, that's just over the game, but is tied into really good accomplishments within the game, finding new and bigger ways, not just more little ways, but new and bigger ways to use them, would be a design space that I would immediately look to.
On the subject of meta, I think at different points in my time in the hobby, I might have bounced off something as meta as story points. But ultimately, in my experience with them, is that they lead to conversations at the table, and the
Mhm.
conversations tend to be about the context of the adventure and the campaign and the drama of the situation. Is this a time to use it? And so, in that way, I realize that story points do really have a place within the system and are a great storytelling tool and a great just tool for engagement at the table. Somebody could be, thinking about their next turn, and as soon as one of the other players is like, "Should I use a story point for this?" They're like, "What? What are we doing? We're talking about story points," and they have to pay attention to something that isn't necessarily going to affect them.
You mentioned it's a shared limited resource, and that is, ammunition isn't shared or limited. Your various different points for your skills and everything like that generally are tied to the thing, but these are the thing that we all have together, and me using one means you can't. So yeah, I see a lot of validity in saying this is us getting together and thinking about when we need to dig deep and when we're going to try and do those things. So I see that there is a significant value, and I've experienced that. Right? Nobody just says I'm going to use a story point. They have the conversation that you just described.
Ready for shoutouts?
I think so. This was really good. I'm very, very happy to hear this kind of thing because, again, this is another piece that is very, very easy to miss. And it's probably very easy for GMs to miss, but it's another aspect of this game that's different than other things. And I love it when we explore those pieces. So, yeah, shout outs.
And I like exploring them with you. So, a couple of shoutouts. One, we were just talking about Hawk's personnel files. So, the last time we were talking about it, I had to do the whole long spiel of like, the PDF is available, but only for people that pre ordered the physical copy, and then you get the PDF as a bonus. Now the PDF is available to everybody. So you can just go in there and buy the PDF if you don't want a physical copy. It is available. If you buy it now, you get to download it right away. And of course, that means that the conversations in the Renegade Discord have picked up because now the second wave of people that are experiencing this for the first time have come in. And again, people are really happy with this book. I don't remember the last time I saw a book that got this much excitement behind it. So if you have not checked out Ox Personnel Files, maybe because you're not a GM and you think it's just a book of threats, it's not just that. It is full of player options, and it is just for the lore junkie, for sure. It is the world of G.I. Joe explored through the lens of the G.I. Joe role-playing game like never before. And finally, there is 1 week left to back the G.I. Joe Risk Kickstarter. You know Risk, you know G.I. Joe. If this interests you, you've got a week to back it. Actually, Rena in the Discord was saying that if they hit 1,000 backers, they might do something fun. And actually, they were even open to ideas of what fun things they could do to celebrate 1,000 backers. So if you have any ideas, head on over to the Renegade Discord and, help them out. Who wants a bonus shout out? Charles and I specifically recorded a new episode, even though we have an episode that's in the can, which is on my methodology for essential builds, because he came across a Humble Bundle that he wanted to shout out to, and then we forgot to shout out to it. So, on Humble Bundle right now, the Ennies, so EN World, is hosting the award-winning and nominated Tabletop RPGs book bundle. And wouldn't you know it, there is an Essence 20 book that won an Ennie and is therefore included in this mix. It is the Essence 20 Field Guide to Action and Adventure. Again, one of the books I am proudest of from having worked on, and it's fully compatible with all of the Essence 20 books and specifically focuses on G.I. Joe, Power Rangers, and Transformers, and talks about a lot of GMing advice. If you are looking for GMing advice for Essence 20, this book is packed with it. On top of that, it talks about how to maximize crossovers. You can have a world where just all of these exist, or you can have a world where they temporarily cross over, bump heads, and it also explores how a world with all of these different options existing would be different from any of the one settings that stand alone. And so you would have Power Rangers that can morph. You would have, they can already convert, but now they can morph. You can have G.I. Joes that are specialized in the morphin grid, because now this is a major power source that people have to worry about. Odds are, if you're listening to this podcast, you know about the Field Guide to Action and Adventure. You know why it is such an asset to have for any Essence 20 player. But just in case you don't, it is one of the books that I wish more people knew how amazing it is. And I strongly consider it that no matter what Essence 20 setting you're playing in, it should be the second or third book you pick up for your game, even if you have no plans on crossing over. So the Humble Bundle, I am, of course, on the Canadian site. So for as little as $6.98 Canadian, you can get it and 27 other PDFs, including the Pathfinder Player Core and Monsters and Mutants and Masterminds, Heroes Companion, and all kinds of other books that were either nominated or won awards at the Ennie Awards, which is really the only big award for role-playing games, the one that is most widely recognized regardless of publishers. So yeah, it is for less than the cost of a PDF. Oh wait, no, if I only want 8 books, what do I get? My bad. If you only pay the minimum, then you do not actually get the Field Guide to Action and Adventure. Let's see, the $20 bundle does include it. Okay, so my mistake. For $20.69, you get 17 items, which does not include the Pathfinder Player Core, but does include the Essence 20 Field Guide to Action and Adventure and Mutants and Masterminds Heroes Handbook, and 15 other books that you should check out because they are award-winning. If you are curious about what else is out there, this is a great opportunity to see just a wide variety of games. And then if you are willing to put in $34.48 Canadian, then you get all 27 items that are listed on the site. So there will be a link in the show notes, or you just go to Humble Bundle, look up Ennie Awards, and you'll find it easily. Anyway, back to the call to action. So thank you for joining us for the latest episode of Upshift. If you would like this podcast, you can go to nodirectionpodcast.com and find other great gaming podcasts and blogs. And of course, thank you to our patrons. You can find out more at patreon.com/no direction. And finally, thank you to Word Burglar for the use of Letters from Snake Eyes Part 4. You can find out more at wordburglar.com. And congratulations to Word Burglar on successfully funding the Rhymes with Comics Kickstarter. Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Charles Cushman, awarding you a story point.
This has been Upshift.